all, my name is Haley Comet and welcome to my cosmic corner of the internet where we discuss all things astrology. And today, Planetary Pep Talks Jupiter edition, talking about how you can synchronize with the cosmos when you know you have a Jupiter transit coming up. Now, you might think it's all luck, abundance, and expansion, which it can be, but there are some significant downsides that you're going to want to be mindful of when you go into a Jupiter transit. Just so you know what I'm talking about when I refer to a Jupiter transit, I mean a conjunction, a square, an opposition. Mostly, trines or sextiles are more helpful energies. You should still listen to make the most out of it. But if you're having a harsh aspect, conjunction, square, opposition, you're definitely going to want to listen. And that's to one of your personal placements. So your sun, your moon, your rising, so it's on an angle, your Mercury, your Venus, or your Mars, you're going to feel the most intensely. 8 tips in my planetary pep talk of how to make the most out of your Jupiter transit. Before I dive in, if you wouldn't mind, keep it in the back of your head. If you learn something new, if you get excited for your Jupiter transit, if you make a mental note, if you wouldn't mind considering dropping a like, commenting something below, subscribing, those little nudges are truly what helps me create these videos, these planetary pep talks, so I'm so appreciative. And without further ado, let's dive into the 8 tips for coping with a Jupiter transit. So firstly, your first tip is to expand your reality. That is the purpose of Jupiter transits, is to expand your perspective. So Jupiter transits are really a time that the cosmos is encouraging you to try new things, to expand your outlook on this reality. So if you have been in a rut, Jupiter transit is just the kick you need to invite in some new stimuli into your world, invite in some inspiration, invite in some expansion. So if you know you have a Jupiter transit upcoming, this is a beautiful time to try new things purposefully, to get yourself out of any rut, to be able to grow and to move forward. Keep in mind, Jupiter is the largest planet within our solar system and it governs expansion. So this is your celestial push to get out of a rut and expand your perspective. Now, how do you do that? That's by doing new things. And tip number 2 is one of the avenues that you can explore down that, which is travel. Jupiter governs travel because what a perspective enlightener, right? When you're having a Jupiter transit, that is a beautiful time to get yourself into a different country, around a different culture, meet different types of people in order to expand and to inspire your perspective, to see a different side to this world that maybe you hadn't considered before. Jupiter transits are such a beautiful time, whether it is a road trip across your country or it is backpacking to somewhere halfway across the world. Get yourself in different environments because there is truly something to be said about the sort of soul illuminations that bubble up when you are traveling. Tip number 3, if traveling's not your thing, or maybe it's still in the midst of that thing that shall not be named, is another way to travel is by learning. Jupiter is the planet of higher education, of learning, because that's another way of enriching our perspective. So if you've had those soul urges like, oh my gosh, I so want to learn French, or oh my goodness, it would be so cool to be able to study astrology on a more serious level, Jupiter transit is that beckoning to ask you to expand yourself and to get some higher education. And that can be, getting your master's, or that can be even just enrolling in a class or a certification. The worst thing that you can do during a Jupiter transit is to stay stagnant. So anything that you can do to enrich your perspective, whether it's intellectually, whether it is physically, traveling, whether it is mentally by reading different books, enriching your mind, I want you during a Jupiter transit to really invest in being able to move forward and equipping yourself with the education or with the life experiences that will prompt that move forward. Another avenue of exploring this is spiritually. So that's tip number 4, is being open to spiritual developments or illuminations that come up during this time. Jupiter is a planet about finding meaning in this world. So during a Jupiter transit, it could be this feeling where it's like you go to work, you go to your 9 to 5, and you come home and you eat dinner and you watch TV and you're just like, is this what life is about? And Jupiter transit is like, no, there's so much more to life. Come with me. Let me show you. So when you're having a Jupiter transit, it's a really great time to go on that quest for spiritual knowledge. So some might go to like a meditation retreat. Some could get into Buddhism. Some could go on a spiritual journey or having a spiritual awakening. Jupiter is how we find and assign meaning within this reality. And of course, this is going to look different for every single person who chooses to watch this video, but Jupiter is the planet of faith. So not saying you have to go, join a religion if that doesn't resonate, but even just being able to develop a personal spirituality, maybe praying or meditating, and maybe where you find meaning is spending time in nature. Maybe it's yoga, something that allows you to feel spiritually connected, because Jupiter transits are the sort of transits that wake you up and be like, there's more to life than what you've been doing. Like, there's so much more to explore and to feel and to learn. Tip number 5, as Jupiter is the planet of expansion, you can expect a lot of growth within your world, but I also want you to be open to give back to others. Jupiter is this sort of energy where it can fill us up with this feeling of luck and of good feelings. It's almost like this Midas-like aspect where a lot that we can touch during this time can turn to gold. And Jupiter is our ability to give to causes other than ourselves. Like, consider how Jupiter exalts. That means its favorite position in the sign Cancer, the nurturer, the giver, right? So when we're having a Jupiter transit, it's such a beautiful time of maybe how we find meaning is by devoting ourselves to an altruistic cause. Maybe it's like leading a spiritual support group, something that can give to our community, give to a cause that we hold dear, and just give back to humankind, because it typically is a time that we're feeling more optimistic and we're feeling a little bit more faithful. And you can be such a light in the darkness for people who are struggling. Maybe they're having harsh Saturn aspects and they just need something to believe in, and you can kind of be a way shower in that, in either joining some sort of charity organization or maybe even leading one up yourself. Tip number 6, which is kind of related to that, in that you're sort of like this Midas-like energy, and that you can really get a lot done during this influence. You have luck on your side. So a lot of times when I meet with clients and, I've been telling them about their Jupiter transit, and I'm like, you got to do something. And then the next year I meet them and I'm like, what'd you do with your Jupiter transit? And they're like, nothing really. I mean, I felt really good and then I didn't do anything. That's the thing with Jupiter, is that you can be filled up with good feelings, with a feeling of optimism, like anything's possible. And there's like such overwhelm that you're seeing opportunities everywhere that you just don't do anything. Like, Jupiter is a sort of transit that sort of fills you with hot air of getting excited about a lot of things. And it can be hard for a lot of individuals to sort of funnel that excitement into concrete actions. So I always say, when you're having a Jupiter transit, Jupiter is the planet of luck. It's considered that if you launch things or go for things during this time, they're likely going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy, in that you're feeling good about it, you're feeling optimistic, and success sort of follows. So no pressure, astro anxiety, I know it well. Whenever I have a good transit, I'm like, oh my gosh, I gotta make the most out of it. I don't mean to put pressure on you, but I will say, if you've been talking about for years that you wanted to write a book, Jupiter transit is the time to finally release it. Like, it could be a very lucky transit, so long as you actually take concrete steps and actions towards it. So this tip is really channel that luck, that optimism into projects, into something. Launch things out there, even if it's just that reach pitch. I want you to think that the cosmos are supporting you with luck and with opportunity, and you need to seize it or put things out. And maybe not every single seed that you plant during your Jupiter transit will bloom, but a couple of them will. So take advantage of this, because I've seen so many times that during Jupiter transits, we can just kind of relax or feel good or eat a lot. And don't get me wrong, I've had many Jupiter transits like that, but if you are looking to build something concretely, Jupiter can be a great time. Now, tip number 7 is, while it can be a very lucky time, our optimism can go overboard. We can definitely tilt towards excess or gambling, right? Because Jupiter is luck, and we can find during Jupiter transits, particularly for my friends who are dealing with the opposition or the square Jupiter transit, this is a sort of influence where you could just be like, oh, it'll be fine. It'll be okay. It'll all work out. Because Jupiter is a sort of influence where you do believe that it'll all work out. You tend to feel more optimistic, but you can be a little bit more dismissive in terms of things that you should genuinely be cautious around. Like, Jupiter transits will have you betting 5,000, even if you know that it could be gone in a moment. Jupiter transits are when you could set up a business and be like, I don't need to pay taxes, because it's very important to keep in mind that how things are right now at the time of filming this, Jupiter is going through a sector and Saturn's coming right there. And if you don't know much about Saturn, I do have a video about it, but Saturn is karma. We're taking really, really reckless risks. If we're going to excess within our life, spending beyond our means, Saturn catches up and we'll have to pay that karma. So it really is a balance during Jupiter transits is yes, take advantage of this time, launch things, put things out there, but know that you are in a headspace where you're a little too optimistic, that you might not be perceiving every single risk. So in terms of business partnerships, things of the like, seek an outside opinion or make sure to plan things out so Jupiter doesn't fill you with hot air, because Jupiter will be whispering, it'll all work out, don't worry about it. Balance that risk-taking, optimistic spirit with some logistics, because unfortunately, life can't just be all Jupiter all the time. We do have to deal with logistics every so often. And then my final tip is just in terms of excess, like our budget, even our diet or things of that nature. Jupiter, we're just like more, more, more. We can be a little greedy, whether it is with money or with food. We just want more, more, more. It's like low-key moritis, I like to say, that nothing's ever enough. So if you are someone where you're moving into Jupiter transit and there are certain guidelines that you really want to stay between, you do not want to go over on your budget, or maybe you really do want to take a trip, so you have to budget to make that work. This is a sort of influence where you need to make sure that you're on a concrete plan, or you have strategies for sort of regulating it, because Jupiter is sort of influence where it's like, it'll be fine. What's another happy hour after work? Or it'll be fine. What's another 4 cupcakes, even though I want to compete in a bodybuilding competition later. It's a time that we tend to be not as disciplined or as regulated with ourselves. And I'm not saying you necessarily need to call that in if that's not what your goals require at this time. But I've just seen so often that during Jupiter transits, it's like we're feeling so optimistic that we could, overshop, overspend, over gamble. We don't have a really realistic grip on our means and what we can realistically sort of handle. But all in all, Jupiter transits are a beneficial time. I don't mean to scare anybody, but there can be more negative manifestations of it, which is going overboard, which is not really having any concrete results to show from it. So I just want to leave you, if you are having a Jupiter transit, please use this time to expand your reality, and maybe a particular topic that I touched on in this video, maybe something made your heart sort of like leap out. Maybe you're like, yeah, I really do feel this call to get more into my spirituality. Or maybe you're like, oh, I really have always wanted to travel to Finland. Maybe this is the year I'll make it happen. Or I've always really wanted to learn Spanish. I want you to follow that. I want you to expand. I want at the end of your Jupiter transit to feel like you're out of a rut and you're in a different place within your life, because you'll have many Jupiter transits within your lifetime. But I've just had many experiences of meeting with clients and they're like, yeah, I just kind of felt good and I spent a lot of money and nothing really happened. Jupiter is luck, abundance, and expansion, but it's up to you where you direct that energy and where you funnel it into for what you want to grow and how you want to move forward within your lifetime. So learn that language, go on that spiritual quest, launch that business, paying attention to the logistics, of course, and make the most out of this time. Friends, thank you so much for tuning in. My Instagram handle is @Comet Astrology. My TikTok is the same. I would love for you to join me over there. Let me know which planetary pep talk I should do next, which transit you have upcoming. And until we meet again, drink lots of water and stay cosmic.